Hello again. Welcome to another episode of Gung Ho. Actually, it's the second episode on April 10, 2019. We're talking about some very serious things, post-traumatic stress disorder, the way veterans have been treated over the years. And I want to have my guests introduce themselves again. Go ahead.
Jack Blow, the moderator, and honored to be with three warriors.
Ron Scott, also a former warrior and author and veteran of Vietnam.
I like to kid that I was chairborne. I certainly wasn't a warrior, but I was a reporter for Stars and Stripes in 1972 during the Easter Offensive, and I am the author of a memoir called Heroes to the End.
And yet, so many reporters and journalists were killed in combat areas. Robert Caro, who was killed in Vietnam, had fought through World War II and Korea, and then was killed in there. So scores of journalists, reporters were killed in the, I remember when Al Gore served in Vietnam, they mocked him, you weren't in combat. He was there where and when it counted, in battle zones, subject to great, great peril and danger. So I would never, ever consider you anything but a man who was there when and where it counted, Jim. But you had mentioned earlier that there was such a thing as moral guilt.
Moral injury.
Moral injury, moral guilt. I could tell you, for example, in World War II, 11,000 American soldiers suffered court-martials. 11,000 for serious crimes. 140 of them were executed for rape and murder. American soldiers all in Europe, by the way, in the Pacific, nothing could be done. North Africa, Italy, and Europe. But one of the things in Vietnam that we, of course, became aware of was the My Lai massacre in I believe March of '68. Where were you, and were you aware of it? And were there other examples that you were aware of this kind of moral guilt and what happened there? Joey?
March '68, I got relieved of my command. I was on a sweep through a village, and about a click away, 1,000 meters away, one of our companies had been ambushed and had about 50% casualties. So they told me to go through this ville. It's going through the ville. It was really heavily fortified, slit trenches everywhere, bomb shelters, and then we started finding North Vietnamese enemy web gear, and I just said, just destroy it, burn it, blow it, and we did. We started, and I was part of an interrogation of, we thought he was a North Vietnamese prisoner, but turned out he wasn't. And we almost killed him. And within like 10 minutes of that, I was standing in front of the battalion commander. I was relieved of command. I remember the conversation. He said, "Lieutenant, what are you doing? You just have destroyed a friendly ville, and you just have like almost killed a friendly." Then he said one more. He said, "What would you do if one of your men stepped on a mine in the village?" I said, "We'd kill the nearest civilian." He said, "You're relieved." I got relieved. The thing about the moral injury is, to me, you see something or you do something, and it's so bad that you never forget it. Like I saw a woman murdered, and Vietnamese woman murdered, and I didn't have anything to do with it. I even spoke up, but it didn't make any difference. But that thing to this day, bothers me, because even though I witnessed the murder, I didn't report it. Understand? It didn't even go through my mind. Something I should say something to somebody. These people that are involved in it should be, I didn't think that way. But I witnessed the whole thing.
Well, in March of '68, I was in a fraternity at Nassau Community College, drinking beer and working for the school paper. And of course, I read every line of the coverage about My Lai and Cali and Medina and, you know, just the photos of the bodies laying in the ditches. And, you know, I just said to myself, what the hell are we involved in? And of course, it seemed so remote. I didn't realize that the war would still be going on 3 years later and that I would be there. But in '71, '72, I did not see any atrocities. I did not see anything that would cause me distress. I saw our guys, and you know, my book title, Heroes to the End, talks about guys doing heroic things right up till the end of the war. And so thank God I was spared the worst of it. But sitting at the bar at my VFW post, doesn't take long till someone talks about something they saw that they'll never forget.
Right?
Oh boy, the My Lai situation incident actually was, I say, fairly close to me personally, because that was a Charlie company, and that company was out of the Americal division, which happens to be the same division that I was assigned working with. And the company, my former company, was also a Charlie company. And the geography of My Lai was the exact same geography we patrolled in my company. So I said, this company C, okay? My personal situation was before the My Lai incident, because going back in memory, I have several occasions that I could list. But one that I think I can bring up right now is a situation where we were on patrol and search and destroy mission, and literally taking a break, coming out of a stream, everybody's soaking wet and everything else. And I had one of the fellas in my platoon was searching for a cigarette, and we're wet, right? So one of his buddies says, "Here," and he threw him a pack of cigarettes. He catches the pack of cigarettes, and he's in the process of trying to extract one, when boom, all we can see is his boots. Sniper took him out. The reaction at that moment, you know, the reaction is like everybody's running for cover. You don't know how many out there shooting. It was just that one bullet. Okay. I'd have to say probably within 2 hours after that, we were entering this village. At that moment, I can't. Every soldier out there was not himself anymore. You know, you just had that memory in your mind. And as we entered the village, reminiscent of what you said, Joe, is that it was like a free-for-all order. Everybody felt that way. Free for all. Shoot, kill, whoever you see, whatever's moving. The irony of it is that when you came in, you didn't see any men. It was all women and children. So we knew where the men were, right? And the association was one of them just killed one of our buddies. To a man, I couldn't, it was like everything was a blur. To a man, everything was a blur. I could hear gunfire in the village. I could hear it. You know, I could only imagine what was being, who was shooting, what was they shooting at. I just know that when we left that village, the village was on fire. Fire, grenades went into any kind of hole we found, rice mounds and everything. We would throw diesel oil on it. We lit up the village. But you don't know the casualties or the collateral damage. I personally, to this day, couldn't attest to the collateral damage that occurred and, in those couple of hours.
I did something really bad. I was point for the company, and we were actually online approaching a village, and we started getting fire from the village as we were approaching. And I said something crazy, but I was like, my company commander was behind me, and I was joking, but this is how sick we were. I said, kill all the men, rape all the women, eat the babies, and burn the village. And the company commander was right behind us. He said, you're crazy. I had yelled that out. And we got into the village, and we did something terrible. We threw Willie Peter grenades into every bunker and just kept going. I mean,
Boy.
I never told anybody that, ever.
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 The first time. That bothered
Today,
me.
now?
Yes.
Now it's the first time. Wow.
I have never
Wow.
said that. I never told anybody that. I spoke about the murder of that woman. That really bothered me. I mean, that was bad.
That white phosphorus was generally used to mark a position.
Yes.
So that burned hot. If anybody was there, they're likely to have the flesh just cooked right off their skeleton.
Yeah, it was a really disgusting thing to do, but we did it.
One of the things that I like to bring up, which is very sensitive, but the stain on American history is slavery and racism, and it's continued to this day as a critical black mark in our country's history. Racism exists in the Civil War, for example. There were 200,000 African Americans who served in the Union cause. No prisoners were taken. The Confederate Army killed, executed every African American Union soldier that they could get. In World War I, the Harlem Hellfighters was an excellent group of fighters, but they received very little. And so when they came back, they were absolutely forgotten about, the Harlem Hellfighters. In World War II, I remember the first ship that was, at the beginning of the war, there were cooks, stewards, and they finally had an American ship of war, the Mason, that had an all-black American crew, but all the officers were white. All the officers were white. And of course, the Tuskegee Airmen were an incredible, they never lost a single. They were escorting bombers into battle zones. They never lost a single bomber in all of the time that the Tuskegee Airmen. But when I wanted to ask, was there any experience of racism that you gentlemen could relate to us during the Vietnam conflict?
I was assaulted by a gang of blacks simply because I didn't turn around when somebody asked me what time it was. And they said, rabbit MFer, when I talk to you, you turn around, and broke my nose. So from the other side of the street comes another black guy with wire-rimmed glasses and a green towel, and gives it to me and says, "Don't stereotype." And he turns out to be, a psych major at UCLA, and we became very good friends in Cameron Bay. But, as these guys know, there was generally no racism in the field. The racism took place back in the barracks after the engagements were over, and I saw black guys shuffling around on heroin, listening to Motown, and I also saw ritualistic handshakes right in front of my face that were called daps that took about 2 minutes to take place. Them just letting us know that when they got back to the U.S., it was going to be different, and that, many of them had witnessed the Black Panthers, and there was this feeling among the blacks that I was acquainted with that there was going to be a race war in the U.S. and that they were going to use the tactics that they learned in Vietnam. On the other side of the coin, I wrote a story about a guy who established an Afro workshop in Cameron. And the purpose of that was to break down barriers between the races and between the enlisted blacks and their superiors. So that was a noble effort, but those type things were few and far between.
Ronnie, what about you? As an
think-
African American, from your point of view.
Well, I think right off the top, I think about my first day in country was at the 90th replacement.
Long Bin.
Long Bin, 90th replacement battalion, I think. And you're being mustered in and everything else, and the company that the company I was shipping with from the States, where many of us were reassigned from our original orders, and myself and I think 5, 6 other GIs were told that we were originally supposed to go to the Red 1, but we were not. We were told our orders were being changed. There was only 6 of us. Everybody else went to the Red 1. Anyway, what happened is that it gave us extended our time at Benoit. We stayed there almost a week, waiting on reassignments. And my closest buddy and my closest buddy was very, rambunctious, and or I should say free-lipped, which got him in trouble later on. But anyway, he made comment. He says, Scott, he says, you notice something? So what? He says, I don't see too many black guys around here. He says, most of the people here are, particularly the staff, most of the people here are white. He says, what's with this, where's all the blacks? We happened to be sitting in a mess hall when he said this. Who's behind us but a black staff sergeant who was special forces? He had the beret and everything else, and he was going home. And he overheard that statement about where's the black guys. And he says, oh, don't worry about it. He says, you'll find your brothers as soon as you get in the bush. Mm-hmm. He says, you'll see all your buddies in the bush. He says, you won't see them here. These are headquartered people, So we got the message and everything else. Long story short, he was right. When we got our reassignment, at that time we were sent to the Central Highlands, Americal Division. And when we arrived at Company C, that was the awakening. Company C was almost like the complete reverse of what we saw in the processing center. It was predominantly black, Hispanic,
And poor white.
And poor white. Black, Hispanic, and poor white. And it was like, wow, it's like, what's the word for it? It's like the ghetto was just transported over here. This is what it was like. And again, most of your officers were white.
Joe, what about you?
Boy, oh boy. Well, first of all, I grew up in Nassau County. I graduated from Massapequa High School. There were no blacks. There were no Hispanics. When I enlisted in the Marine Corps, was the first time. Actually, it was the first time I was around blacks and Hispanics and poor whites. I didn't know what racism was because I had, my family, we didn't. My dad always said, you treat a person, don't ever judge a person by his color, and I believe that stuff. When I got in the Marine Corps, I experienced racism both ways, black and white. In the field, at that time, in '67 or '68, there was absolutely no problem in the field. my platoon was, I always thought was mostly black, Hispanic, and poor whites, and I called them a youth gang. And I was, I was their leader. It's like, I'm leading a youth gang.
You
But
were a kid yourself.
I was 24. I was the oldest one in the platoon. There were no problems in the field at all. In fact, we had a policy called the checkerboard. Every fighting hole had to be a mix of white and black. Nobody used the term black back then. Negro and white. And that's the way it was. And they all got along. When you went back to the rear, I went back to the rear on occasion, there were problems that I was like shocked, because there was, in the rear in Quang Tri, one night I was there in the company office and a firefight started inside the perimeter. And I'm thinking there's gooks in the, see, racism. I'm thinking there's enemy in the perimeter. And no, it was white guys fighting black guys inside the perimeter. And I think that one of the things they were fighting about is that the white guys were flying a Confederate flag. But they actually got into a firefight. And I said to myself, this is fucking crazy. And I got into a bunker and that's it. When I came out in the morning, the tent that the black guys were in was gone. There's nothing there. So, but my experience with race in the Marine Corps, I thought it was great. I loved, I think I had a great experience being around Negroes and Latino people, poor whites, was a great experience for me as a person. I think it made me a better person. That's what I think.
Okay, that's good. Now, Patton, one of the most ferocious warriors that we've ever produced, once said that war is an orgy of chaos. That's how he described it. And he talked, in World War II, there were so many incidents of friendly fire.
Oh, yeah.
Thousands killed by friendly fire. In Vietnam, was this a problem as well? Is this an accurate depiction? Friendly fire resulting in the death of God knows how many American soldiers and Marines?
Yes, of course it was, but I have a chapter in my book called 5 O'Clock Follies, and it referred to the press briefing in Saigon at 5 o'clock at night. And I can tell you, several times I was in the field during the day, and then quick jumped on a chopper or a plane and got back for the briefing. And needless to say, the official statements did not jive with what we knew was true. In some cases they were saying, well, the ARVN 326th engaged with the enemy at so-and-so point. Only I was there, and the ARVNs were sitting on their helmets, eating rice, and they were firing artillery over a copse of trees into the enemy position. But when I asked, sir, weren't most of those enemy casualties due to the artillery fire and not infantry? Well, I'm sorry, son, I don't have any more information on that at this time. So, yes, there were friendly fire incidents, but they were hushed up and, kept from the press.
Ronnie?
From my experience, most of again, as Jim said, of course it was friendly fire incidents. And again, going back to the memory bank, most of those incidents that I can say that I pretty much witnessed was because of, what's the word for it, poor direction from an officer, giving in the wrong coordinates for either an airstrike, artillery, or what have you. My platoon leader, who was a lieutenant at the time, had liked to have me come and work as RTO every so often, because I was one of the few guys that, first of all, that could read a map. He didn't even have much confidence himself in reading the map, okay? And more than once, I had to play, quote-unquote, assistant in terms of our coordinates when it came to calling in artillery. And I did my best or what have you, and I can say that I'm happy to say we didn't have any friendly casualties when I did, call in the numbers. But on the other side of the screen, I remember being in a situation where we were, running for the best cover we could find, because incoming was coming from us.
Yeah.
And needless to say, it was lucky that we didn't use friendly fire on the officer who called in those numbers.
Joe, I know you had an experience that you relate in your book about that young fella from Pennsylvania.
It takes so long. The first Marine that was killed in my platoon was a machine gunner. He was assigned to my platoon. He was killed by friendly fire. And that has never left me, ever. He had finished his tour, and he was shot right in the head by another Marine. But there were other times of instances of friendly fire. Every type of ordnance you could think of was fired at us by mistake. I'm telling you.
Well,
Everything.
We just about have only 11 seconds.
How much more do you have to go?
Well, I had another couple, but I wanted to.
You want-
do you,
you want-
gentlemen, I wanted to end this by Shakespeare's Henry V, in which he said, "We in it shall be remembered, we few, we happy few, we band of brothers. For he who sheds his blood with me this day shall be my brother." Do you gentlemen consider yourself a band of brothers?
Oh, of
you
course.
said, "I'm not fighting for God and country, I'm fighting for what?"
Fighting for one another.
For one another.
That's all.
You can hear my voice, just drop me a line. 'Cause